This is baby Lucille on the left and poet Lucille on the right. So Dahomey Women, the Power and Poetry of Lucille Clifton. And I wanted to first sort of explain what Dahomey Women is by reading an excerpt from my mother's memoir, Generations. So my mother was born in Depew, New York, and her father, Samuel Sales, was quite a storyteller. So I think storytelling just came naturally to our family. And he would tell mom stories about when he was being raised by his grandmother in Virginia. And I will read a portion of his description of that, which will just explain to you what Dahomey women are. Also, if you're aware of the recent feature film, The Woman King, starring Viola Davis. That is a story of the Dahomey women warriors.
Can we ask people to mute themselves? I'm not able to do it once screen sharing is on. So if everybody could mute themselves.
Thank you. So this is a quote from my mother's book, Generations, and this is in her father's voice. Walking from New Orleans to Virginia, Daddy would say, you go through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And that's the walk Mammy Caroline took when she was 8 years old. She was born among the Dahomey people in 1822, Lou. Among the Dahomey people, and she used to say, get what you want, you from Dahomey women. And she used to tell us about how they had a whole army of nothing but women back there and how they was the best soldiers in the world. And she was from among the Dahomey people. And one day her and her mama and her sister and her brother were captured and thrown on a boat till they landed in New Orleans. So to understand, as I was a kid, I understood that I came from a line of women who survived things. And it was a point of pride for me. This was just a clip from a still shot from the movie Black Panther. That when I saw that originally before the film Dahomey Woman King came out, I thought of the Dahomey women warriors, and this was sort of another point of strength to me. So it was just wonderful for me as a child to think that I had some of this kind of strength and perseverance and sense of community and sense of responsibility just in my bones and in my blood. So I'm going to stop share for just a moment and talk about me and my mom. Because I've been asked recently that what was it like to grow up seeing your mother do this writing? And I have to say, I thought everybody's mother did that. Mom wrote at the dining room table. That was her place to write. So, and we as kids knew not to bother her when she was writing, but she was always doing that. So for me, particularly as the eldest daughter, I had a great model of what a mother, woman, sister, creative could be. The fact that one did not, I don't think I ever felt that my mom sacrificed a relationship with us as her kids to do the writing. It wasn't about a choice. It wasn't about what she was doing. It was about who she was. And that was really important to me to see. And I will share again, because although, sorry, I apologize. So this is a very blurry picture of me and my mom. This was one year at the LA Book Festival. And it's interesting to me, or curious in some ways to me, because my mom had described the two of us as not being very much alike. What she said at one time was that I played it very close to the vest. She let it all hang out. I moved quickly and was kind of tall and lanky, and she moved slowly and deliberately and was not tall and lanky. But we were best friends. We were absolutely best friends for the longest time, and we understood and accepted each other's differences. I want to quickly see if I can do this multimedia thing where, Okay. I just wanted to see, I apologize. I want to see if I'm successful in this. Guess I have. I wanted to show some clips from YouTube. Um, all right. This poem describes my mother's relationship with her mother and something that tied her to her mother and also tied her to me. So I hope that you'll be able to hear the audio. Please, if you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. No? Okay. Okay. Well, my, what a day. All right. Well, my mother wrote a poem called 12 Fingers, and essentially it's about her having been born with 12 fingers like her mother and her daughter, and I'm that daughter. Um, the I should have brought a copy of the poem, but essentially what she says is that we are connected in some magical, mystical way. Um, she being her mother's eldest daughter and me being her eldest daughter. And now we connect through our terrible, shadowy hands, she says, is the last line. And I think that is absolutely the case because there have been many times as the oldest child where my mother was very intuitive and she knew things. And I find that as I grew up, I started knowing things and hearing things and being creative in a way that was very significant. It was a little scary for me at a certain point. But then um, watching my mother's career evolve and watching her go from mommy to Lucille Clifton was quite an interesting journey and process. So we're going to go back to my PowerPoint now and try to do this well. All right. So we saw that. So this is our house. This is my pictures of my mom on the porch in our house in Talbot Road in Windsor Hills. And what I can say about this photograph is that when I see her, I see a sense of ease and a sense of pride of place. When we were growing up, we moved a lot when I was a child in Buffalo before we moved to Baltimore. And again, as the eldest of 6 children, it seemed that every time my mother had a baby, we were moving. We were constantly renting houses. And even in those days, while she was poetic, I did not observe her as someone who was writing at a table. I did not observe her writing poetry. But in this house in Windsor Hills, I did, and all of us kids did. So she was not only proud here, she's so young here, but she's also silly. She could be extremely silly. And that's something else that we loved about Mom and watching her sort of embody all the parts of herself. She was hilarious, loving, protective, and and in her usual place, had a child under her under her arm over here on the side. Usually, my baby sister. Um, this is a picture of us dancing in our living room. I'll tie this back later on, but this is another part that is really deeply resonant for me because she is someone who, although she was serious about her writing. She was disciplined about her writing. She also had a capacity for joy. That was something that was extremely important to us, and it's something that I believe that we embody now as kids. As I mentioned before, she would write. This is her writing in the family room. This is how we usually saw her. you know, this is an IBM Selectric 2. Back when we thought that was very fancy and an upgrade from she wrote on a manual typewriter when we first remember her writing. And you see all these papers behind her, and that's generally mail, but also her her notes and her drafts and her correspondence and her office. So the office is what was then our family room. This is who we saw as she was emerging from mommy to Lucille Clifton. What this taught to us was that motherhood meant creativity, and creativity meant discipline. And as creatives, myself and my sister who's passed away, I think it was very easy and almost natural and normal for us to apply levels of discipline to our creativity. I'm a producer in my daily life, in addition to running the foundation, and this was just the model we saw. So she was a great model, even though she didn't sort of explain to us, I'm doing this because of this. This was just the way her creativity flowed, and this is what we were taught. This is what you do when you're an artist. So I want to read one poem from her most recent selected poems called "How to Carry Water." And this poem describes her day to day before her first book came out. Somewhere, some woman just like me tests the lock on the window in a children's room, lays out tomorrow's school clothes, sets the table for breakfast early, finds a pen between the cushions on the couch, sits down and writes the words, "Good times." I think of her as I begin to teach the lives of the poets about her space at the table and my own inexplicable life. And that for me it gives me chills because I understand being a mother and doing the mother stuff, and then also having the creative life and trying to, when she talks about the inexplicable life, trying to make sense of it when you have not seen that before. And I think that for myself, also as a creative mother, I often am trying to make sense of it still with, 4 children, 2 of 3 of whom are now adults. It's very interesting thing that we as mothers do. And so that's another part that I ponder and wonder and feel humbled and grateful that I saw this model in my home, that I was raised with that. So my mother's book, Good Times, was published in 1969. It was named by the New York Times as one of the then 10 best books of the year, her first book of poetry. When she, in this evolution from Mommy to Lucille Clifton, she wrote many books, both children's books and poetry. So these are just sort of some of the books that she wrote during this time, and primarily in this house. The children's books almost exclusively while we were living in the house in Baltimore. So she did this publishing. This photograph was taken of Mom and her kids on the front porch and the steps on the front porch of the house in Talbot Road. This was taken by a photographer named Raleigh McKenna for her first book. And this is me in the slightly misshapen afro. So as you can see, also we were all very close in age. So my mother had 6 children in 7 years, and I cannot imagine that. She's also often stated that that's why her poems were so short, because she had 6 children and very little time. But she progressed from this mommy to the cover of her book, An Ordinary Woman. It's beautiful, and I can see, I probably knowing her, can see the difference between that first woman sitting on the porch and this woman looking almost angelic. Gets me a little emotional on her book, because she has found, and her voice and her work and her intuition and her way of walking in the world is being defined now. And we saw that as daughter. I don't speak for myself, but I think we as kids, but I know that I saw what that confidence could look like, and the fact that she started using her voice even in her home more often. And the fact was, I talk about sometimes when you have women who are starting to eclipse their husbands, and my father was an extraordinary man, did many things, was an artist and activist, but Mom was getting attention. And it was interesting to see that dynamic, and I noticed it even then. And it was almost classic, honestly. So my dad was he worked for the Model Cities program. He was on the team that developed the new, at that time, the new Paul Dunbar High School in Baltimore. He was on the team that was part of the development of the Afro-American Studies department at Harvard University. But mom was getting attention, and he was not used to that. So it's quite interesting to see. And I think that for me, it even more sort of underscored the importance of having one's own voice and of being and having the confidence to acknowledge and empower and really speak to every part of yourself as a woman, mother or no. So here's mom with June Jordan, Alice Walker, and Audre Lorde at the Phyllis Wheatley Poetry Festival in 1979. And this is a cadre of very powerful women poets and writers who have had quite deep and resonant impact on women writers from that time and continue to do so. One of my favorite photos of this group. Finally, this photo of mom and Toni Morrison at an event in New York City. Mom and Toni went to Howard University together as kids, and they were reunited in person here. They'd actually been working. They worked together because Toni Morrison edited my mother's memoir, Generations. So that was the first time that they were sort of reunited, but they didn't do that in person. But this is where they saw each other again after 40 years. So this was mom. This is looks like it's might be at the National Book Award ceremony, but this is mom in her full, what she called in her full Lucille Clifton, which was wonderful to see. And she did very much sort of make a distinction between Lucille Clifton and Lou, as she was called when she was a kid. So that was also interesting to see because she was very elegant and eloquent and magical in a way that I hope to have a little piece of that in the way that I walk in the world. So I have a slide. And see, these are some of the awards that mom accumulated. One was awarded in her career. She won an Emmy Award for "Free to Be You and Me." It was a mixed media special with Marlo Thomas in 1976. Amifika is one of her children's books that won Jane Addams Children's Book Award. Good Woman and Next were both finalists for the Pulitzer Prize in the same year, and she was the first poet to ever have two books up for a Pulitzer Prize in the same year. Her children's book, Everett Anderson's Goodbye, won the Coretta Scott King Award in 1984. She won a Lannan Literary Award for Poetry from the Lannan Foundation. Blessing the Boats, New and Selected Poems, won the National Book Award for Poetry in 2000. She won the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize in 2007, the first African-American poet to be awarded that medal. The Robert Frost Medal, she won it, at least was aware of it when she became ill, and my sisters and I accepted it for her after she passed. And the Collected Poems of Lucille Clifton, 1965 to 2010, was awarded the Hurston Wright Legacy Award for Poetry in 2013, 3 years after she passed away. This is the house on Talbot Road, the house where we grew up, where her poetry career began. My parents lost this home to foreclosure in 1980 through many various and sundry reasons, some of them about their communication challenges at times. My father was traveling a lot. Others just because there are interesting banking things, issues that can come up. But the bottom line was we lost it to foreclosure in 1980. It was traumatic. I remember being in the house when the auctioneer was standing in this area, and we saw people just come up, and it was very triggering just to be standing in the windows watching people auction off something. And I remember at one point it being so surreal. And sometimes, when something is so surreal that you can't believe it's happening, your mind goes to interesting places. Mine does anyway. And I remember at that time thinking, like, wow, the auctioneers really do talk really fast like that. I just thought it was something that you saw, on movies and TV and such. They really talking. They really can do that fast thing. So that was extremely difficult for the family. Life continued, but it was never the same. And my mom had been quoted as saying that she didn't think her family ever recovered from the loss of that house. But we moved into other houses. My dad passed away in 1984 at the age of 49. We were living in Dickeyville at the time, renting houses. We rented, or Mom rented houses from after the loss of this house. Then my mother, after my father passed away, moved to Santa Cruz, California, where she taught at UC Santa Cruz for 3 years, I believe, and then was offered a position at St. Mary's College in Southern Maryland, and moved back across the country, lived in part-time in Columbia, Maryland, and part-time in St. Mary's during the school year. And that was where she taught until she passed away. My sister Frederica passed away in year 2000 from brain cancer. She was 39 years old. My brother Channing passed away in 2004 from combinations of congestive heart failure complicated by schizophrenia. Both of those very devastating to my mother, and my mother has been quoted as saying that when she passes away, the first thing she's going to ask for is an explanation of someone's going to have to explain to me the deaths of my children. Terrible for Mom. And then my mother died on February 13th, 2010, which was the anniversary of her mother's passing. Just devastating for the family. And sorry. So there we are. She is. So life goes on, as we mentioned earlier. And as I also mentioned, I'm someone who is connected to my mother and my grandmother. Now, that doesn't mean I plan to pass away on February 13th. I've stated for the record that it's not necessary. I understand the poetry and the patterns there, and it's not necessary for me to do that unless I'm 107. I will accept. But interestingly, on the 9th anniversary of my mother's passing, February 13th, 2019, I woke up with an instinct to reach out to the owner of the house on Talbot Road. And for whatever reason, I said, I'm just interested in knowing what the status is. At some point, a few years earlier, she'd shared with me the fact that she was preparing the house for market. But that was a few years earlier. I had no thoughts or expectations about what the status would be at that time. And she stated to me that the house had been put on the market that day. I was emailing from Los Angeles, and so I had chills, which is amazing. So I said that I would like to be considered one of a potential buyer, which seemed impossible at that time, again, because I live in Los Angeles and the cost of living here is quite high. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I didn't really have any reason to believe that financially I'd be able to pull it off, but I did. I bought the house back in 2019. Wow. And I will see if I can, let's try that sharing thing again. See if this will work this time, because there's an article from Harper's Bazaar that Yes. Okay. 40 years ago, poet Lucille Clifton lost her house. This year, her children bought it back. Even saying it feels like a miracle. So my initial thought was, oh, this is great. I can just have, when I go to visit Maryland, I can go to visit my family, I have a place to live. I bought the house sight unseen, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend under normal circumstances. But at that time, that was the right decision. So we have now, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. We have established the Clifton House. So this is the remix of that earlier photograph. Myself and my remaining siblings sitting on the steps of the house on Talbot Road.
Don't see we don't see the picture of the new picture of the
okay.
house. Can you take that other one down and put the?
Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you. And I woke up probably 3 weeks after thinking about, okay, the Airbnb stuff and doing all that research and when I could get there and all of that. And I said, I woke up and I remember calling my sisters and saying, okay, you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but this is what the house has to be. I thought about the way we grew up with my parents having guests, other poets and artists and activists and creatives coming into the house and just having this sanctuary for creative people who were sharing resources, sharing experiences, just strategizing, feeling, and it's often with creatives you sort of feel like I'm weird and the only one, and this was a house of weird only ones that became a community that was really strengthened after spending time with my parents and other kids. I was mentioning last week the writer Honoré Fanon Jeffers, who wrote the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I met her when she was 5 years old, when she was visiting with her father, Lance Jeffers, who's also a poet, visiting our house with her mom. That was what the house was then. And I decided that's what it needs to be now. So I created the Clifton House, which is a writer's workshop space, a workshop and artist residency space for emerging, underserved poets, writers, visual artists, etc. And in doing so, have created the opportunities for people to come together, learn their craft, to be with other like-spirited folks. We do not discriminate on any form or fashion. We try to uplift and center underserved people, but that could be how that is defined is really probably up to the person who's feeling underserved. We've had virtual events. We had our first in-person event this past week, and it was beautiful. I will attempt to show photos of that as well. Some of the other photos from virtual events include our partnership with the graduate school at Howard University. They hosted a pop-up workshop with the poets Frank X. Walker, Tony Medina, and Shauna Morgan. We had that in later to 2020. We are also partnered with, as I mentioned, Gina Davis's C. Jane Foundation. This was a celebrity poetry reading. We had Alicia Reiner, Marley Dias. These young people are amazing people, by the way. Alora Young is the youth poet laureate of the state of Tennessee. Terrence Little Goodenough, Garden High, is an actor. Isabella Gomez, also an actor, and Louis Gossett Jr., who is Oscar winner and a dear friend, reading my mother's poetry and amplifying, celebrating her life and her work and her influence. And we are now the the C. Jane Foundation and the Clifton House are now partnered in having an annual event that will be also a fundraiser for the Clifton House and Clifton House programming. I'm going to see if I can show I'm going to show our Instagram because the events we had last week, and I apologize that I'm not eloquent today, but I'm also a little jet lagged. Let's see if we can show this. All right. And I recognize that you might not have video, but I did want to show some of these photographs because this was a group called, it was a partnership with Scribente Maternum, Write Like a Mother, and City Lit, the City Lit Literary Group. I'm still sort of basking in what was an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful event. Let's see if I can move this over. Okay, don't want to report it. Don't want to do that. So what you see is that there's joy back in that living room. There is joy and there's craft and there's, it gives me chills just to watch. And the legacy of who my parents were. Yes, this was just, yeah. It still continues and will continue. So that's Maria Broom leading our closing session, which was wonderful. The house has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Renovations are in progress. They continue. And it was a deeply, deeply magical weekend, a validation of everything that I think my parents stood for, but also everything that I saw that this place could be for artists. And the fact that we were able to pull it off, it was, yes. Again, underscored the dedication, the creativity, the intuition, the discipline, and the commitment that I learned from Lucille Clifton, who was an extraordinary, extraordinary woman whose voice and whose influence seems to continue. We had a full house, and as people kept saying, like, Mama Lucille is here. Going into the house, both my parents, the vibe is still there, but the fact that I've now successfully, to date, pulled off this project and have established something that will outlive me, certainly, and will continue to give to the community in very, very meaningful ways. This is a space, again, for artist residencies, workshops, artist retreats, but also this is a place where people had courageous conversations. And I want this place to continue to be so. One example I thought of this morning, when we see all of the the state of the world, right? I was having a conversation with a friend of mine from junior high school. I went to Pimlico Junior High in Baltimore. And when I was at Pimlico, at least in my class, in my circle, the Black students and Jewish students were very close. It's not, in some classes they weren't, but in my class we were. And I was, for example, when we could see that trouble was brewing, I was one of the students who volunteered to walk Jewish students to their classes. It's like, we'll walk together and show that level of solidarity. I want to have those conversations in that house. I want this to be a place where not only a sanctuary for artists and creatives, but what my father showed me was he was a model of um, of how art and creativity informs activism, and that's important to me as well, because my father was very active in the National Black Assembly and things. And he'd often say, I remember him quoting when someone was saying that he was being anti something or very exclusive, and he was saying, like, to love myself, it doesn't mean I have to hate you. My parents were never those people. Everybody was in our house. Absolutely everyone was in our house. And that neighborhood was the same way. So that's why it's important to me too, for this to be the sanctuary for, it sounds corny, but making the world better, leaving the world better than we saw it, than we found it. And I truly believe that we're certainly able as individuals to do that, but I feel like the Clifton House being that model is important to me as well. And I wanted to end with a poem that we clearly can't hear Mom reading, so I'm going to hope that I can remember it. But her poem, "Won't You Celebrate with Me," which is one of the ones that inspires people, and certainly inspires me. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight, my other hand. Come, celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Thank you. Now I'm open for questions. Thank you. Because I may have blathered, so.
Thank you so much, Sidney. That was really beautiful. And we will entertain questions now. I want to put it back on gallery view and see who is asking questions.
Well, I'm going to ask one while people are thinking. Sidney, how are you going about letting the public know about this? You obviously just had an event, and although I think I read a lot of papers and try to keep up, I didn't know about it. So I'm just curious. That's one of my questions. How are you going to let everyone in the area or other outside of the area know? And since you're not here, who manages the house?
All great questions, all being answered as we speak. So we primarily through our website, and I can give that web address. I'll drop it into the chat.
Okay.
We have events there. We also have a social media admin who uses social media, but we recognize that not everybody's on Instagram and does that. I just got back on Facebook, so we are having my executive and programming committees are having a meeting this Sunday to talk about these are the things we need to put in place now, because things are starting to happen. There are a lot of people who are lining up who want to have events or want to partner with us in some form or fashion. What you'll see, by the way, in the chat, the Clifton House is .co, not .com. So you'll find that there. There's a calendar of events. There is a virtual tour of the house. In terms of managing it, I'm pretty much managing it. I did fly. I was there for the Baltimore event and just got home yesterday. But we're also hiring a program, sort of calling a program or project manager, because there'll be different things. It's not really a full-time position yet, but we will need someone who can show up at the house when someone wants to do a walkthrough, who can organize some of those things. I also have had a virtual assistant. My virtual assistant, who's a wonderful, lovely, lovely young lady, now has gone to her PhD program at Howard University. So I'm going to be looking for another virtual assistant very, very shortly. But I also, again, two of my sisters are there. My brother is residing in the house, sort of like being there in the area. But in January, he'll be moving out, and my son and his fiance will be moving into the third floor of the house, because it's a 3-story house. And my son is an actor and a teacher, so he'll be leading probably Shakespeare workshops, because he's a theater actor, for young people. And his fiance, who they live in Boise, Idaho. His fiance, who is a events coordinator for the city of Boise, will be acting as events coordinator or other things as needed in the house as well. So the short answer is, it's coming together. You're absolutely right. Those are the questions I ask myself very often.
Okay. Did you have to do a lot of renovation?
We do, but not a ton. Interestingly. So we're doing it in phases. I recognize during this event that there's a first floor bathroom, second floor bathroom, and first floor powder room, second floor in something that's going to be the Lucille Clifton suite. There's a full bath, half bath on the second floor, gallery space on the second floor. So what we did today, which sort of phase one, was that bathroom. We made sure that it was usable, ADA compliant, and beautiful. And it's probably one of my favorite rooms in the house now, because the custom wallpaper is my mom's poems.
Oh,
it's gorgeous.
Well, to follow up on that, Sidney, and then I have another question about the poetry. Is your son going to be connected with the Baltimore art scene, the young people? I mean, there's lots of really important young artists here in Baltimore, and I'm sure would love to partner with you or participate in whatever way.
Absolutely. And that's sort of part of, I think, what we're, because I think I'm going to fly him there for November for Thanksgiving, and he'll probably have Thanksgiving with my sister. But he's excited about that opportunity, because he does that in Boise, but to do that in the city where he was born, he's very much excited about that possibility. So I think he knows it's going to be significant. I think it's going to be even more significant than he thinks. Actually,
we have another speaker coming up in a couple of weeks who is an art professor at Bowie State, and she is very much what you talked about in terms of an artist activist.
Yes.
And I think she might be a good connection for you. I'll put her in touch, the two of you in touch. She's not a Baltimorean, so she won't know exactly Baltimore's art scene as well as some other artists would in Baltimore, but she's also connected to the state of Maryland.
Oh, yes.
So I think that might be a good partnership as well, because she's
Wonderful.
very much interested in public art and how art is used as activism. So.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about your mother's embodiment. And by embodiment, I mean really her understanding and use of her body, her poetry. I noticed that the one about homage to my hips was flashed on the the video. So as they danced, and I love the fact that you had Maria Broom leading that. That's the Baltimore art scene right there.
Yes.
But I also am struck by the one these are in the book, the Maryland Women of Achievement.
Yes.
The one lumpectomy Eve and her sorrow for that.
Yes.
I wonder if you could say a little bit about that, because it seemed to me that she was a very sensual person as well as artistic and through her poetry, at least.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think she was probably, that's, her poetry was the place where she had permission to be sensual. And I found that quite interesting because, after my dad died, my mom didn't have relationships after that. So, and there was some sorrow about that. So about, not having a relationship, but she also was comfortable with her body and had the relationship with it, which is also was a great model for us daughters, by the way. And I think the fact that she was creatively so courageous was just extraordinary to witness. So back to meet Eve, but she also had a sense of humor. So Wishes for Sons. I don't know if you've read that one. Also a funny one. She talked about her body and interestingly, this is sort of it hasn't happened yet, but my mother's book, the Book of Light, is being re-released by Copper Canyon later this year. And I wrote the afterword about it. And in the afterword, my theme was about Mom, her connection to both desire and divinity, and how similar they were for her. I just always found that quite interesting in her work. And she sort of navigated through it and came to an understanding about how, for her, they were the same, or related at the very least. And that came later in her life.
I don't see any hands up, so I have another question. And that was, you said that you started to write poetry when you moved to Talbot Road. But did she write poetry before that, as a child or as a young adult? Or
absolutely, she started
what
writing
was the
poetry.
impetus for starting it in Windsor Hills? What was the impetus for that?
She started writing when she was 12 years old, when she was a child. We only saw her writing in Windsor Hills. And I think probably because we were of an age enough to pay attention to someone outside of ourselves, honestly. But she also at that point had a stable place to write. Because as I've mentioned, we moved a lot when I was a child. And by the time we got to Baltimore, we were there, we put down roots. My parents bought that house. So it actually was probably a safer space at that point. Certainly a much more stable one. And, then she had that sense of place. She, again, in the dining room table or in the family room on a desk, and was able to be, I think us kids we were all out of diapers enough, or at least enough of us were out of diapers, where she didn't have to be on 24/7, sort of mom vigilance, and had the space.
Do you have some of her early poems too? Did she save her early poems as well?
Some of them. There is in the collected poems of Lucille Clifton a section called Uncollected or pre-1965, because 1965 I think is when that's when some of them were written, and I think the first ones were published in 1969. But Emory University has my mother's papers, and so there are many things. There are many treasures there, and they're searchable online if anyone's interested.
I'll have to look at that. And when did she become the Poet Laureate of Maryland?
1979.
79.
From 79 to 85.
What's that process?
That's a great question.
How did that happen?
I do not know the answer to that question. I apologize. There is a committee of a sort, and a person is chosen. I'm not sure how many people are on the committee, though.
Very, very good. Wow. Okay, I'm looking to see if there are any hands up. For
It's
Pam,
okay.
but I don't see any.
Swaran has her hand up, Babs.
Okay.
Swaran, ask your question.
Or you have to unmute.
Did she ever have any of her poems turned into music?
She did not, but many people have asked about it. and I have seen performances of her poetry to music. I found it online, interestingly. So it's not
There.
necessarily. Mhm. There's um, and there was one an independent and well, she's not independent, but there is a musician named Ani DeFranco who did a version of "Homage to My Hips."
Because
That
I,
was
s- I saw her dancing with you when you were little. So I was wondering if any of those things she would put into form.
um, yeah, she loved music, and other people have done that, but she had not done that. It's interesting.
Thank you.
She
Absolutely.
did say in the video, the YouTube video that you sent us the link to,
Yes.
that she loved to dance.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
and that's what I was wondering if she ever added music to that, her own music.
I see Larry had his hand up.
Yeah. What was her role in Free to Be You and Me? Because that involved music.
Yes, it was a mixed media special, meaning animation and live action and puppetry. And she wrote her story. Three Wishes was a featured story, and it was animated story, and it was narrated by Cicely Tyson. So we thought that was extremely cool back in the day.
Wow.
Sidney, has ever anybody said that you have the forehead of, you were showing these Dahomey women? Remember in the
No.
beginning, you were showing the
Yes.
Dahomeys. Has anybody said your face and your forehead has a resemblance to some of them?
No. That's amazing.
I was looking at your face and your mom's,
Yeah.
but yours was standing out because their foreheads and their shape of the face. I was wondering if anybody had. I was very struck with that.
I love that. I love you for that. Thank you.
But go and take another look at them. You will
I
find
will.
it out.
I will. Thank you.
So your long range plan for Clifton House
Yes.
is to keep it open to the public and artists, and you mentioned residents. People could stay there as well if they needed to.
Yes. Yes.
And
And
will you be doing tours of the house at some point?
we probably will, and that's one of the things we were talking about with programming and executive committees. It will probably start like once or twice a month after it's not snowy anymore. In probably end of Q1 or Q2 2023, so next year. And we'll make sure that we have, and even if renovations are going on, I recognize that the place doesn't have to be perfect for it to be resonant, for it to be impactful. We want to make sure that people know enough of the stories in each room. We know that we have enough sort of the pictures of the way it was, and here's where it is now. But absolutely.
Sidney, where is the house? Where is the house? In Baltimore?
Yes, it's in
In Windsor
Baltimore.
Hills.
In Windsor Hills.
Would you ever consider partnering with Ivy Bookstore?
Ivy Bookstore.
They have similar sentiments. They are thinking of having residents, live in their place. And since your mom's contributions are so beautiful and so rich,
Yes,
I think Emma Snyder may be very interested.
absolutely. I would love that. I would
I
love
see. I
that.
see it as a summer in the city for Renaissance too, as maybe an event
And I
for
think
the touring.
that Diana Bailey from the Heritage
Yes,
Center wants to do something with you when you come back for that in the spring. So
absolutely. Yes.
we can all look forward to somehow seeing you again, and this time in person.
Yes.
And,
Thank you.
Perhaps working with you on some event at the house.
I would love that. I would love that.
Well, we really thank you for this today. I think many of us probably weren't nearly familiar with your mom's poetry.
No.
Of course, I knew about her and probably had seen a few poems, but the opportunity to look at the some of here, look at the YouTube, go to the links.
Yes.
And of course, now we know, and we'll all run Swarren up to Ivy and see which of her books they have on.
Well, you have
Not which we can order.
you have opened so many doors for us.
Yes.